Truth Unveiled here, and today I have some serious stuff to share with you. We're going to be talking about everything revolving around the 2024 elections, or should I say selection, along with Project 2025 and a few other things, and talking about and telling you what could occur following this election indeed. Now, on this network, you probably noticed I've yet to really talk about or discuss anything revolving around the selections or elections. However, today we're going to be discussing it, and the reason we have not really gone over much is because what distractions, and not to distract your mind with things. However, the things that we're going to be talking about today, I'm led to share with you. So we're here at the Times where it says quarter of Americans fear civil war after election, according to them. Times poll shows a YouGov survey less than 2 weeks from 2024 election day reveals voters' unease over violence. Now, again, the question you need to be thinking about is when it comes to your mainstream media, why are they constantly and consistently talking about civil war and everything having to do with that around this time? Now, this article brought up what happened on the Capitol building as of January 6, 2021, 2 weeks before Trump left office and Biden entered office. Now, it's just interesting with this whole event. Now, by the way, this event was staged, in case you don't already know that. Yes, it was staged and it was a hoax. It was not actually real. But it's interesting how they have National Guard troops. What exactly are they getting ready for? And is this all conditioning leading up to the real thing? But the article actually goes on to say this. More than a quarter of Americans believe that this could break out after this year's presidential election, according to polling for the Times. Fears that an eruption of violence is very or somewhat likely are shared across the political divide by 20% of American adults, including 30% of women and 24% of men, and this was according to a survey of over 1,200 voters as of October 18th through the 21st. 12% of respondents said they knew someone who might take up arms if they thought Donald Trump was cheated out of victory in under 2 weeks' time, and 5% said they knew someone who might do the same if they thought Kamala Harris was cheated indeed. And then the article goes on again to bring up what happened with the Capitol building and the so-called riots. Again, this was faked and staged hoax. But then there are other eerie things that they mention that you need to pay attention to and keep mind of if you already have not, because then the article goes on to say Barbara Walter, a prominent historian of the 1861 to 1865 American Civil War, wrote in the best-selling 2022 book How Civil Wars Start and How to Stop Them. So why are they mentioning books that have to do with Civil War? And by the way, this is not the only one, but it says when measured against a checklist of the factors that can lead to conflagration, quote, the U.S. has entered very dangerous territory. They added that, quote, we are close to civil war than any of us would like to believe because of political extremism, cultural tribalism, the embrace of what they call conspiracy theories, proliferation of guns and militias, and the erosion of faith in government and democracy. And that's not the only place that references a civil war. So we see this reference not only in the news, but also in books and in movies too, which we're going to go over later on in the moment to come, because Civil War, that was a movie that was released around Unleavened Bread earlier this year, right after the eclipse, by the way, featured a despotic U.S. government fighting secessionist rebels, took more than $120 million at the box office. This is an article from The Independent. Now, again, all of these things will be linked in the description box below, but it says here, never mind Trump losing the election, America's next civil war has already started, and this is how it will end. Again, why are these articles so adamant about talking about these things around the time of the selections? Now, if we keep going, the article goes on to read, when Stephen Marsh began writing a book that imagined a future civil war in the United States of America, they repeatedly found themselves having to throw out large chunks of text because the very things that were conjured on the page suddenly started happening in real life. For example, such as sheriffs across the country refusing to obey federal law, white power groups getting their hands on nuclear material, or so they call nuclear material. Marsh soon realized that the Civil War predicted had, in a way, already begun. Isn't that interesting? Why are they even bringing up these things? Why are they hinting at a civil war? The better question you need to be thinking about is, what are they getting ready for? Now, here's more information on that book entitled The Next Civil War, the book that we just went over. And again, this adds to the Barbara Walter book as well, both books published in 2022, where Marsh suggests that the U.S. could come to be governed by a right-wing dictatorship within the next decade. Again, what are they getting ready for? Is this potential conditioning? Is this potential subliminal predictive programming, how they're telling people what's going to happen before it actually happens? Now, again, it's more than likely that nothing will happen with this selection or election, but again, it's important that you be awake, alert, and aware of the world around you, because again, they could be talking about 2028, 2029, they could be talking about 2031, 2032, or very well, they could be talking about this year. Indeed, we really don't know, but again, it's important that you be alert of these things. But notice how it says that the premise of the book is based on, quote, sophisticated predictive models and nearly 200 interviews with what they call experts, Civil War scholars, military leaders, law enforcement officials, Secret Service agents, agricultural specialists, environmentalists, war historians, and political scientists. Marsh prepared plans for the next Civil War by negotiating with soldiers and army experts who take control of conflicts. But again, you have to remember what? Problem, reaction, solution. Your government causes the problem and then offer their own solution by, oh, look, we have to merge together as an OWG, as an NWO. And then not only that, offer their own solution to the problems that they caused. Would a potential civil war do the exact same thing? Let's find out. And in case you have not seen this film already, I highly recommend you do. I highly recommend you watch it just for the predictive programming purposes. It's entitled Civil War. That was released earlier this year. It was released, I want to say, in April here in the US of 2024. Again, just days after the eclipse that occurred as of April 8th around the spring appointed times earlier this year. But isn't it just interesting that what? They say in the movie that a civil war has engulfed the US, that an authoritarian federal government led by a third-term president, isn't that interesting, is embattled by secessionist movements. And by the way, secessionist movements have to do with what? When states secede or leave the Union, or when states decide to leave the United States and basically essentially become their own country, just like what happened during what? The first Civil War in the 1860s. You can look up more about that or do your own personal research and look up the history behind that on your own time. Now, it's just interesting because in the movie itself, despite the president claiming victory is imminent, it is widely expected that DC will soon be reached by Western forces led by Texas and California. And if I'm not mistaken, in the actual movie, I want to say that those states actually did secede in the movie indeed. So isn't it just interesting? All of these things are going on and it depicts all of this stuff and the violence that goes on and the fighting and the militias and all of that. What do you think it's leading up to? What do you think it's showing you? What do you think the predictive programming is? Now, like I said, later on in the video, we're also going to be talking about the Project 2025, and you're going to see exactly what that is and what it's outlining and the details behind it. But before we do, this is an article I found very interesting and suspicious indeed from Vox that says, inside Trump's ominous plan to turn civil rights law against vulnerable Americans. A look at Trump's idea for a key Justice Department division uncovers the potentially disastrous consequences of the assault on democracy. But the question is, what democracy? Does your vote even count? Because last I checked, presidents are selected, not elected. And by the way, when it comes to inaugurating a new president, notice how they go based on the electoral vote, not the popular vote. So pay careful attention. Again, they're subliminally telling you that your vote never counted, your vote never mattered. They know who they're going to pick ahead of time. So again, why even vote? And scripturally, we are not supposed to be voting according to Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 17, unless we are in our homeland and Yahuwah chooses whom he wants to choose as sovereign to be ruling over us in our land and at that appointed time, just like in the days of old. That's why I personally do not vote. And again, when you understand who Democrats and Republicans really are and what the DEM, what that's really short for, and what the REP and Republican is really short for, then you'll start to understand who's really behind the electoral process and who's really behind these presidents, or should I say ID serpents when you unscramble that word Indeed. But moving forward, the article goes on to say many people have warned that Trump is a threat to American democracy. Now, again, isn't it interesting how these articles are trying to demonize Trump? Again, what are they trying to do? Divide and conquer. They want as many people divided when it comes to Trump as much as possible. That's why on this network, I really have not talked a lot about Trump and Harris and everything that's going on and some of the ideologies behind it, because I know the truth behind it is what? They're just trying to turn people against each other, trying to turn groups against each other, and trying to merge these groups against one another. So, for example, the immigrants versus people who are against the immigrants, right-wing extremists against left-wing extremists, and the list goes on. People who support abortion versus those who don't. Don't you see, again, what they're trying to do? They're trying to turn people against each other, and of course using the economy as well to do so with shrinkflation, inflation, hyperinflation, whatever word you want to use. It's the same thing. Many others have argued that these warnings are politically inert, that focusing on abstract concepts like democracy and the rule of law removes political debate from the concrete concerns people want addressed by government. Do people struggling to pay the bills have time to care about such matters of principle? Yet in reality, the two things are inseparable. Trump's plan to turn the government into a tool of their own personal will could have extraordinary consequences for Americans' everyday lives. And again, they're trying to portray Trump as this dictator and everything, when again, you have to understand who's behind Trump, who's running the show, who does this world belong to temporarily, currently. It would disrupt or potentially even devastate core functions of government that we've long taken for granted. The article then goes on to claim that if Trump returns to power, the department could easily be turned from a tool for protecting civil rights. Okay, since when did they ever protect civil rights? Because last I checked, you're still a slave to the system the moment that you're born, but moving forward into a means of undoing them. Trump and allies have laid out fairly specific plans for doing just that. Plans that, if enacted, would mean a far more radical and methodical transformation of the federal rights civil apparatus than what we saw in Trump's shambolic first term. So basically, what are they trying to say and what are they trying to argue? That if Trump were re-elected or reselected, that what? Your rights would go down the drain. The little to no rights that you already don't have, the rest of those would continue to go down the drain too. And what? Enacting of executive orders, etc. But see, here's the thing. These things have already been going on regardless if Trump's in office or not. And again, that's the part that they're trying not to want the American people to know. That's the part of conditioning that they don't want people to know. They just want people to think, oh yeah, Trump's going to do this. Oh yeah, Trump's going to do that. But see, the government's already been doing that for all the other ID serpents or presidents long before Trump. Now, what I've done here is I've actually, within the last week, I've typed in Google Civil War and then I just put Trump afterwards. And again, this is everything that they're saying. These are news articles that all have to do with exactly that. Why is that the case? And why are they so adamant about this? You see this one where it says election violence is already happening. Is the U.S. on the verge of civil war? What will happen if Trump loses? The threat of civil war. Civil war possible. Trump supporters expect election fraud and violence. How will results affect wars in Gaza, Ukraine? Political violence, fears of civil unrest with the markets and having to do with Trump, voter fraud claims, all of these different things. And again, mind you, this is in the last week. Predict riots. What happens if Trump loses? All of these things. Civil war. Dems say they will certify a Trump victory. Why is this the case? Political violence in the U.S. could surge after elections. And this is from The Guardian that was done a couple days ago. Again, folks, the reason I'm having you see all this and the reason we're here today is so that you can see the bigger agenda ahead of time and see what they're really up to. Because they didn't really mention this when Hillary Clinton ran against Trump back in 2016. They didn't really mention this when Biden ran in 2020, 2021. So why are they mentioning it now? That's something to really ponder and think about indeed. But now if we're going to turn your attention to Project 2025, and yeah, well, willing, we might do another in-depth video on this later on, because there's so much in this document. Again, this is a 900-page document, and I'm actually going to take you to that document in just a moment to come later on in the video. But before we do, this comes from the BBC that says Project 2025, the right-wing wish list for another Trump presidency. Now, again, they're going to go back and forth and say, oh, well, does Trump really endorse it? Now, they're going to argue that Trump does not endorse it. However, this is what it entails. So it's a 900-page policy, quote, wish list for the Republican president, a proposal that would expand presidential power and impose ultra-conservative social vision. So again, Trump has claimed that Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025. However, dozens of former Trump administration officials have contributed to the think tank's proposals, providing Democrats with an attack line against the former president. And this is also conceived by the Conservative Heritage Foundation think tank. Again, are they connected with the Bilderbergers and the Rothschilds and all of them other ones, the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, and all those other alphabet soups, alphabet programs, to talk about how they want to enslave you even more. So again, because this document is 900 pages, it really doesn't make sense to go over all 900 pages. So what I've done is tried to do the best to summarize this in the best way possible. So again, this tells you who actually wrote it and where it actually comes from. This report was unveiled as of April 2023, so well over a year ago. And of course, there's Democratic opposition. Again, you have to understand the devil controls both sides. The devil controls both the Democrats and the Republicans. So again, when they're against each other, it's it's the same devil that they're supporting. Little do they know. But then it goes on to talk about what the document actually is. So it says the document itself sets out 4 main policy aims, and these are the aims that it does. Now, again, as we've talked about with the UN and some of their agendas, it might sound good on paper, but when you start reading between the lines, then you start to see what it's really talking about and referring to, because it says restore the family as the centerpiece of American life. Well, they're doing the exact opposite of that, because they're trying to bankrupt you as much as they can with hyperinflation, shrinkflation, and losing of jobs and everything. So how is that restoring anything when it's what? Getting rid of the middle class. Don't you see what they're trying to do? And then they say dismantle the administrative state. In other words, code words, give more power to the president, ID serpent, enact these executive orders that are unconstitutional and remove unconstitutional rights, or remove the constitutional rights that you already don't have. Defend the nation's sovereignty and borders. How are they going to defend the nation? With more military and secure what they call God given individual rights to live freely. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? Actually, it doesn't. Now, this is actually what I find very alarming about this document, is where it says that it proposes that the entire federal bureaucracy, including independent agencies such as the DOJ or Department of Justice, be placed under direct presidential control, a controversial idea known as a unitary executive theory. Doesn't that sound just like what? Martial law? Because what? The DOJ, aren't they the ones behind what? Funding these FEMA camps and funding the military and what? We've gone over this in previous videos on the previous channel when we talked about what? Things like the NDAA or the National Defense Authorization Act and all these other things that what? Give power to the military, and also what they're doing, and how, and even what we talked about during COVID, how that was a big test for what? Checkpoints in the military and locking everyone down, curfews, more control. So in practice, that would streamline decision making, allowing the ID serpent or president to directly implement policies in a number of areas. Don't you see how this is leading up to martial law? Don't you see how this is leading up to civil war indeed? Now, again, we're not saying it's going to be right after this election or around this time, but do you see what it's leading up to? That's the important part as well. So again, why are they giving more power to these federal agencies, or these alphabet soups as we call them? Again, what? Bloated, arrogant, increasingly lawless organization, so that what? Eliminate job protections for thousands of government employees who could then be replaced by political appointees. So again, getting rid of more jobs. Then it goes on to say abortion and family. The mentions of abortion in Project 2025, about 200 of them, have sparked some of the most contentious debate. The document does not call for an outright nationwide abortion ban, and Trump says that they would not sign such a law. However, it does propose withdrawing the abortion pill from the market and using existing but little enforced laws to stop the drug being sent through the post. Again, read between the line. What are they trying to do? Divide and conquer people. But it's interesting because they also touch up on immigration, where it says that Project 2025 also proposes dismantling the DHS, which we talked about in great detail, the Department of Homeland Security, and combining it with other immigration enforcement units and other agencies, creating a much larger and more powerful border policy policing operation. Don't you see the problem with that? The problem problem with that is what? More surveillance. And not only that, more checkpoints. They're getting ready for what? The shutdown. I know we're kind of speeding through these documents again because there's just so much to go over, but we will link them in the description box below so that you can read it on your own time. It's interesting how it talks about climate and economy as well, that the document proposes slashing federal money for research and investment in renewable energy and calls for the next president to, quote, stop the war on oil and natural gas. Now, we've already talked about on this network how things such as what? Climate change, that is a hoax, when the real agenda for that is what? Carbon taxes. They just want to tax you even more on things that are not even real. And yes, weather modification is real. You can look up HARP, you can look up CERN, you can look up these things and do the research, folks, if you already have not. Because again, problem, reaction, solution. They cause the problem by creating these different weather patterns and so-called storms and stuff, and then offer their own solutions to those problems because they think they're the creator when they are not. That is the agenda here. Tech and education. Pornography would be banned, and tech and telecom companies would allow access that would be shut down. So what is this code word for? More surveillance, more spying. Again, they're trying to eliminate the truth as well. Again, what? Woke propaganda. So again, they want to eliminate those things, including sexual orientation, gender equality, abortion, reproductive rights. They want to get rid of and eliminate those things. Not only that, but they want to try to, quote, end diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in schools and government departments as part of what it describes as a wider crackdown on woke ideology. What do you think they're talking about when they say woke ideology? Channels such as this one and many other ones promoting the truth. Don't you see how this is leading up to what? The beast and the arrival of the dragon, as noted in Revelation chapter 12. So again, as of right now, we don't know who's actually going to enter office or who's going to supposedly win the so-called election or selection. And again, we'll be keeping close tabs on that on this network as well, because it talks about the plan's future uncertainty. But my question is, why would they even come up with this type of project and proposal when Trump hasn't even been selected, or there hasn't even been a selection as of when this video is posted and uploaded? Why even go through all that trouble to come up with this document in the first place then? Because there's an agenda going on here that I'm praying that you see with both your eyes open. Because if you really think that, oh, this is a great thing for America, and oh, this is really going to help Americans, and oh, this is really going to change your life for the better, it's time to think again. But here is the actual website, Project 2025, as you can see right here. Now, again, they're going to call it, oh, a historic movement and all these different things. And they're going to say that it offers a menu of policy suggestions to meet the country's deepest challenges and put America back on track. Yeah, make America great again. That's the agenda, isn't it? I don't think so, because they're going to say, oh, secure the border, finish building the wall, and deport illegal aliens. They're not trying to do that. Again, the reason that they brought these illegal aliens or so-called immigrants here is what? Part of the plan of divide and conquer. And not only that, but what? For civil war as well, because we already talked about this in previous videos a long time ago, that when they're bringing these so-called immigrants here, again, secretly, and they're bringing way more than what they're telling you, and a lot of them also they're bringing from Islamic countries too, they're bringing them here so that when stuff starts hitting the fan, again, they're going to be used to plunder and pillage and ignite the civil war even more whenever that is. Then they claim that it's going to de-weaponize the federal government by increasing accountability and oversight of the FBI and DOJ. Don't you see how problematic that is? Again, more surveillance, more spying, turning America into a dictatorship. Unleash American energy production to reduce energy prices more so, aka higher taxes for you and your family. Cut the growth of government spending to reduce inflation. They're definitely not going to do that. Make federal bureaucrats more accountable to the democratically elected president and Congress. Improve education by moving control and funding of education from DC bureaucrats directly to parents and state and local governments. That's what they claim, and it sounds all fine and good until you read between the lines. Ban biological males from competing in women's sports. Then how about they start by telling you about the transgenders in those sports and at these Olympics? But they're not going to do that, are they? Because again, what? The devil has deceived the entire world. And the question is, are you deceived? Not anymore. Be deceived no more. But again, if you actually go to Project 2025, this is the about. You can read more about it. Now, again, I be very careful about this because, again, there is so much propaganda in here because, again, they have an agenda to make you think that they're trying to make the country a better place when really that is far from the truth. Now, this is the actual Project 2025 document right here. As you can see, it is well over 900 pages long. Like I said, for that reason, we're not going to go over this document in its entirety. Yahuwah willing, we'll go over some parts of it in a future video to come. I'm not promising or making guarantees on that because you can take a look at this on your own time if you would like to learn more about it. But it goes on to say mandate for leadership, the conservative promise. And it says who the forward and the edit and stuff like that. Then it goes on to talk about copyrights. But as we keep going, it should lead to a table of contents, if I'm not mistaken. There it is. So it tells you Section 1, taking the reins of government. Section 2, the common defense. And then notice how it has all of these alphabet soups involved. The Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Executive Office of the President of the U.S., and things like that. Section 3 is general welfare, and it goes on to talk about more governmental organizations that are involved as well, like the DOJ, the Department of Justice. Section 4 talks about the economy, as you can see right here, and then they have Section 5 that talks about independent regulatory agencies as well, like the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, aka the agency that is responsible for spying on your every move. Now, the interesting part about this in this document is that on here, the last numbered page, if you go to the last page of the document, it's actually page 887. So there's actually 887 numbered pages. What's interesting about this, because again, this is how the wicked, this is what they love to do. They love to put subliminals right in front of the public. If you add these numbers up, what number do you get? Oh, that's right. You get the number 23. Isn't that interesting? Is that a surprise or a coincidence? It's not looking like it. Now, why is 23 very interesting and suspicious indeed? You might be wondering, because we've already gone on this network about that number and why that number is so very important. And again, why your elite cares so much about that number. Not only that, but you also have 922 here indeed, and then 23 right there. Wow, that's not a coincidence, because is that a reference? Could that be hinting at September 22nd, September 23rd of so-called 2025? It's also not a coincidence that September 23rd of next year will be trumpets as well. Will actually be trumpets, the day of trumpets, which is an appointed time. You can learn more about this in Uyakra Leviticus chapter 23. We don't have time to talk about that now, but isn't that interesting? All of this stuff coinciding. So again, what is all of this leading up to when it comes to this election or selection, and what could potentially happen afterwards leading up to Inauguration Day as of so-called January 20th, 2025? Who will be selected? Really, on this network, it really does not matter, because they all serve the same devil. They all worship the same devil. They all give and pledge allegiance to their devil, who is God. Because if you think that God is the name of the creator, it's time to also think again and really research. And I highly recommend you take a look at some of the videos located on this Rumble channel of this network to learn more about what I'm talking about, if you don't already know what I'm talking about. But for those of you who already do know what I'm talking about, please continue to seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, so that you will be awake, alert, and aware of the world around you, so that you will see the agenda ahead of time, so that you will not be asleep to the agendas around you, so that you will be able to spot these things ahead of time and to have discernment and understand what is going on in the world around you. But this is Truth Unveiled here, saying as always, Shalom.